an uninterrupted concept of what do we need to implement. So we'll still see how it can be best done. For the time being, let's go into essential issues of under 19 age group preparations. One is reaching about 90% of individually genetically determined potential with the help of advanced sports sciences. When we say that your athletes have to perform at various age groups, at the top of those groups like 14, 17, 19, you may well ask yourself a question, all right, they have already been reaching some potential or some genetically determined ceiling. Yeah, in a way, but those changes, physiological, psychological, biomechanical, biochemical, which have been in place at various ages, like 14, 17, 19, those are actually kind of temporal. You grow through it to the higher level and to your genetically determined in the sense when you or your athletes, to be correct, are fully developed, acquiring their full potential, and then also achieving the performance potential which is corresponding to that level of adaptations, physiological, psychological, physical, mental, and so on and so forth. And if we try to again look back and observe the previously discussed theories of long-term development, we'll see that fine, okay, somewhere there, in those theories they were saying, fine, 21, 22, 23, you start performing at the world-class level. So we are in a way narrowing now this gap, and we follow our pathway, which is more kind of comfortable and more practical from our point of view, to reach somewhere where they were planning to reach it, say at 23 or 25 and 26. We are knocking that door, and 90% of that is to be achieved at the age category of under 19. One thing I want you to imagine and also to pay attention is that once in a while, you guys, and including academy coaches, academy senior coaches, voice out one, not to say concern, but a query or sort of a question saying, all right, countries are all different. In some countries, children are reaching higher performance a bit faster. In some countries, they're reaching high performance a bit earlier. In some countries, there'll be age-related maximum performance will be that much. In some countries, that much, a little bit different. So how do we deal with that? So the answer to this question is reasonably simple. We need to look at it in a bigger picture and in a bigger, actually, scenario. And it all starts somewhere at the age of about 10 or maybe 11, when you are dealing with them at DLSS level. And some people, sometimes kind of overseas guys, are coming to you and say, okay, these are the models or the kind of norms and standards taken from elsewhere you have to follow. And your reaction sometimes can be like, okay, we follow American or Australian or Canadian. And some will say, why should we follow those norms at the early age? It's not fair. And I will agree with that. It's not fair. See, when we take kids from various countries and start that long-term journey with them, of course they are different. Country to country is different. So there will be a gap. They will be scattered at some kind of range. Importantly, however, that when they start from those points at their own kind of countries of origin, and when they start moving towards elite or top performance, that range starts narrowing between national figures or numbers and international ones. They have to. Because if we are eventually targeting Olympics or the World Championships, we have to be equally good then. And better than anyone else, but then only, or maybe a little bit younger if you're talking, of course, Youth Olympics, or if you're talking other age group things, but originally there could be a difference, and that difference can be quite significant. So, please do not take seriously the international norms when they are kind of concerning early ages of long-term development. They may not be that useful. You have to deal with what you've got. And you have to pick the best you can. And you should actually take care of improvement of your internal pool of talent, whatever you've got. And it can or may not be compared with international other ones. They may be better supplied, they may be better having better facilities and so on and so forth. But when you progress and reach those rapper points, under 14, say under 17, or like Youth Olympic or something, this is the time when you go international and you have to be matching other international players. So in the long run, this is actually the time when you are hitting those international kind of level things. So your passage or your pathway from the original condition when you select your kids to that international standard, you may go a bit steeper kind of way as compared to other countries. So, but the reaching point is actually the same. Be it Youth Olympics at under 19, or be it World Championships of under 23, or be it an Olympics at whatever age. There you have to be better than anyone else. So just bear in mind that being at younger age categories, not necessarily you need to be like best in the world. Yeah, some may not. But then, looking ahead, this is when it has to actually start clicking. Potential-wise, everyone is kind of equal. Who will say that the Indian performers or let's say American performers or English or French or German or Russian or whatever, some of them has better potential than others? No, they don't. Potential is the same, kinda. Performance is different. What does it mean? It means that, okay, there is a ceiling for everyone. It's a human abilities. Okay, that's one. How close you are to that ceiling is the story. 90%, 95%, 100%, then everyone there at the Olympics are supposed to be like at the top of their potential, performing at the top. So you start a bit later, a bit lower, but then you are reaching eventually there. So treat it like that. The sky is the same for every nation. Right? So we just have to be somewhere close to it, starting particularly at this age, 90%. Joining national camps, balance between general and specific conditioning is one of the objectives here. So let's go one by one and check what do we have here. Typical approach, again, why is that? Reaching potential. See, the problem when we are hitting again the same topic of exposing athletes to very same levels of training loads, that is the problem. They start reaching their potential early, and then they are kind of hanging in there, and then they have no kind of push and no stimulus to actually work any better than that. Again, repeating so that you still remember it, weekly training volumes sit at about 25 hours in each age group. Not right. Concern about the same for every age group. Eventually, cadets are rapidly progressing, juniors are still winning, seniors don't have improvement age, they have nowhere to go in a way. So, solutions suggested earlier, when you can just sort of try sorting them out in the sessions, letting them out earlier and so on and so forth. However, conflict is still there. Potential for achieving excellence at the optimum age fades out, meaning you are actually sitting at the plateau instead of achieving higher and higher levels and so on and so forth. Like in year 1, year 2, year 3, let's say year 4 somewhere, this is the age of joining the academy. So everyone at certain age has to give that kick. If that kick is not there, and everyone sits right about here, that quite often is a road to nowhere. Number 2 issues. National camps. High performers get attractive job offers and quit. Typically happens before they join national camps. We already touched that issue, so there's nothing much to say about it, except for adding a bit of possible solutions, right? So what is a typical approach? Top athletes unfortunately pick the job over professional sports career. If the league's development and other sports development succeed, then that may well be taken care of. And then, of course, career opportunity, then, of course, monetary rewards, and then, of course, kind of other issues which are unfortunately not in our hands. Concerns that turns years of hard work and efforts into dust. Unfortunately, choices move potential medal winners to higher level academies, increase scholarships, increase kind of monetary rewards so that they can feel that there is a competitive edge at the career opportunities which either governments or universities or ELMS for that matter are offering. One of the issues that I already shared with you, that we are kind of developing the approach whereby the athletes who are not exactly kind of moving into international level and could be possibly subjected to weeding out, so that if they have their own interests in developing themselves into coaches, assistant coaches, or whatever other supportive staff or allied sciences and something, we may well retain them under certain conditions, under certain circumstances, until they decide what to do, how to do, and then they can be reabsorbed into the system in whatever other way. All right? Another offer, of course, another option, offer a contract before that happens. And that actually is in the best interest of the sports authorities, state or SAI, that could be actually the further development. And again, you know better than anyone else that those losses to job offers are typically happening right before, very near to actual hitting the top performance level. Some, of course, are happening after, but most of them are happening right on the way to there. And then when the proper support is not offered from within the organization which absorb those high performance, they're practically lost, right? So those be, of course, contexts like interstate conflicts or personal issues or whatever, something which is not happening or which doesn't help to actually things to happen. All right, another one, insufficient quantity and quality of specific fitness related to equipment and apparatuses, right? So we've discussed that again briefly. If coaches are not actually provided with all the necessary tools and all the necessary equipments and software and whatever it is to produce higher performance, they tend to either do very specific workouts, which may not necessarily be impacting, or they turn back to the gym and say, okay, we need more of gym, more of conditioning, which is in fact not the right time on periodization map to do that. It has to become specific, it has to become sports related, event related, and so on and so forth. Choices, proper balances should be achieved between general and specific conditioning, spoken many times. Solution, invest more into specific fitness equipment, right? That's what we are now expecting out of that cooperation between SAG and the academy, so that eventually we are getting more of that, right? Operational issues, comprehensive nutrition and supplementary support, increased in competition exposure. And now I guess perhaps we can reopen that topic or kind of issues about supplementation, because nutritional issue is becoming more complicated, all right? We, however, still stick to generalized nutrition approach. That is okay, fine, normal. We first develop that level, then with the help of our nutritionists, we will try to split it into age group things and into then sports specific and event specific, which some of our colleagues were suggesting that we should have done that from the very beginning, but we insisted that it was too early. Now I think it's the right time to actually go about it. All right? In theory we agree, but now sports-wise and event-wise we have to go into practice. All right, into supplementation. Supplementation, vitamins, and so on and so. The floor is now open. one thing I can only say that, guys, do not overestimate the magic of supplementation and particularly vitaminization. I don't know where is it coming from, but trust me, vitamins in the required doses which are helping other bodily kind of systems to better function and to make some chemical and biochemical reactions to happen, those doses are in micrograms. Vitamins are not enhancing performance whatever possible way. Moreover, taken in excess, they will be just released from the body unutilized. The bodies will only, absorb whatever quantities are required. Everything else is going into waste. So, please don't do it to yourself, don't do it to your athletes. I understand, and you too. Maybe that's one of the reasons why you keep maintaining certain, statements. There is, of course, a placebo effect which was never and by no one actually removed. Yes, there is a placebo effect. You tell a kid that, okay, this is a magic pill, or this is the most powerful vitamin, or this is the most powerful thing, and the kid starts suddenly performing better. But there's nothing doing biochemically or chemically or something. It's psychological. Please do that. I don't mind. Placebo effect is a very powerful thing. Keep using, but use it wisely. All right? So, I keep telling that joke once in a while to the friends of mine. I remember when I was a kid, and there was a situation just with my mom and dad, and mom was having some kind of kidney colics or something, and she was like in pain, and she was kind of cursing everyone around, including my dad, and said, okay, give me something, I have to remove that pain. He said, okay, just a minute. So he went out, grabbed something from the first aid thing, and said, yeah, take that, it will help. So she took it in 20 minutes. Such a good thing, really. What was that? And he was like, and he, of course, did that mistake. He didn't give her straight away answer, and she said, you cheated, kinda. So he didn't, of course, but there was no medicine against kidney colics. So whatever he gave her was typically a placebo effect. So the pain was just gone. And of course, then that's like an anecdote. And then the fight started. It was no fight, though, of course, but placebo effect is a powerful thing. So vitamins is sitting actually in some void which is to be actually used very wisely and in limited kind of quantities. There is no help in overdosing that, truly. The other part, supplementations, of course, policy matters. I think Deepak can explain that. Of course. Yeah, definitely. So, Deepak, please share your views on that. We are now in under 19. We were not suggesting it earlier, right?
Yeah, see, the first, the concern is, at what age it should be given. And at what performance, at which level he is performing, where the supplements are required. Secondly, the proper protocol needs to be followed for giving the supplements. See, what happened, generally SAG is discouraging for giving supplements to athletes. Now, in the process, it happens that athletes themselves buying the protein without having the knowledge. What is the composition, which particular composition is harmful to body, how to use it. And we have also observed that they are not taking the protein at the time when it is required. They will just take the protein before 1 hour or 2 hours of lunch time. And they skip the lunch. So main thing is at what age it has to be given, at what level of performance it has to be given, and then the proper protocol needs to be followed. That is the biggest problem. And there is danger also. What reaction in body is going to happen to male and female athletes, we don't know. Even they are not aware. So it is a dangerous thing, like giving protein to 14 years, 15 years, 16 years. See, one time I remember you also have suggested that, okay, who are the athletes to whom the protein is required. I got a list of 24 athletes from one game. They were 15, they were 16, they were 19, they were 23. So that is why I am asking this question. Suppose something adverse has happened with some athlete, then responsibility comes on either on the coach or SAG.
You've heard the kind of position, which is valid, of course, and that's typically one of the some of the reasons which Deepak was actually referring to, is why, and at some point that we do have those arguments with administration, sport authorities of Gujarat, and yes, some of those, of course, are valid. And the most, of course, issues are coming from the point of implementation. Of course, even if we have identified that, okay, at certain age only it is, can be approved or can be accepted. Let's say if we are here in under 19, then perhaps in under 17 a little bit of something. But there should, of course, definitely be some sort of a policy on that. And also, of course, the idea or the principle of dose responses also has to be observed. Is it realistically required? When it is required? Even though if we say that, okay, some protein supplementation is there related to the issue, for example, of that same, which we were discussing topic a while ago, on hypertrophy. If natural production of testosterone is not there in the body of the athlete, then the whole idea of hypertrophy is becoming a bit questionable. And typically the supplementation may become kind of questionable. Then perhaps we should also, go for some sort of a confirmation, be it again a biochemical confirmation or whatever it is, so that, okay, people, we are stepping into the next age group, for instance, under 19, and then hormonally the athlete is now more or less fully formed as an individual. Then, if we require hypertrophy, we can top it with legal, of course, and permitted protein supplementation. Then it will make sense under certain circumstances and, of course, under the proper supervision. Because we all know that quite often there is a misuse of that stuff. And we keep kind of reiterating that should be coaches' responsibilities. Coaches start pointing finger at nutritionists, and that no, there is their responsibility. Then whose responsibility is eventually that? And that creates sometimes an issue. However, on the other hand, again, something may be available freely or available on the market, and then athletes go for it. And there is no guarantee that there is no kind of WADA restricted items in that particular supplementation which is purchased right from the market. Because when they manufacture the protein supplementation, I don't want to blame anyone, because the companies may well disagree with that and straight away refuse to say that, yeah, okay, we add a little bit of steroids to those supplementations so to give you quick results. It does happen. But then again, even if we do at our level suggest and put it somewhere in black and white that only supplementation which is kind of confirmed and approved by organization or academy is allowed to be used, still there is no foolproof mechanism on how to do that. All right, so that's also one way or another the point where responsibility is to be kind of clearly determined or removed. So, as you know, quite often easier way of solution is just not to go for it. However, as agreed, in certain cases, in certain situations and necessity-wise, that should be well supervised and used safely, all right? Fine. However, again, if you decided at some point, particularly with top elite or elite athletes, there are minimum three conditions which have to meet together to make it happen. So if you're going for hypertrophy, this would be a very particular type of training, right? Then it's supposed to be positive energy balance, all right, so that you create extra caloric values and positive balance in order to create a tissue. And then protein supplementation. If these three are not actually getting together at the same time, basically everything is wasted. And objectives are not achieved. So it is a complicated issue and a complicated thing. And even to say that, let's see, even before the type of training and before the positive energy balance and protein supplementation, you can even go earlier than that. And then nutritionists and dietologists will say, hey, even before that, you will have to take care on the issues like on the cellular level or somewhere that cells and the kind of supposed to get prepared for that in a very specific manner, which we are not qualified enough even to discuss. All right. Increased competition exposure. Under 19. Remember, we still have varieties in there. So at the previous stages of long-term athlete development, we typically give advantage to training exposure. At this point in time, however, we require more competition exposure rather than training. So use combined pool of the days for training and competition exposure. Play the tactics of picking weaker or stronger opposition, all right, depending on the training tasks. That has been mentioned already, and that becomes even more viable at this particular age and at this particular age group when you need to go, on, over, under, kind of weaker opposition, stronger opposition. It is kind of a bit similar to what, for instance, athletes in track and field are using in throws. Lighter implement, heavy implement, standard implement. So it's more or less the same logic, although with them logic is different. You go for heavy implements, you move to strength. You go lighter implements, you go to speed. You get back to normal implement, you go the complete whole kind of movement coordination. In your case, it is, in a way, weaker opposition to create certain kind of technical decisions, stronger opposition to see how good, how bad you are, and then eventually equal opposition so that you are getting into full-fledged of competition exposure. All right? Right, do your best, and of course we will help too here to convince higher authorities that some competitions are to be won, some competitions to be lost, right? You take hockey, you take football, you take any other game, friendly matches before critical tournaments are not played just, for fun. You pick your opposition very wisely. You're in hockey, you're in football, your defending line is kind of questionably fit. So you go play with the teams which are strong in offense, so that you try how good is your defense, how bad is your defense. You don't play to the other team which is equally bad in defense. No fun. So you have to invite stronger opposition which starts scoring or try scoring, then you adjust your defensive lines. On the contrary, if your team wants to check how good you are in the offensive tactics or that kind of part of the game, all right, you go and check, for instance, the team with seriously well-developed defensive lines. So then you kind of fight against stronger opposition, good defenders, you have good attackers and check how you can actually beat them. So that is becoming important. So you may well again say, okay, we cannot even get any type of exposure, and you are now telling us that we have to go weaker, stronger. We have to think kind of a future, all right? So, and we have to think that way, all right? 21, under 21, we are getting further into age. So what are the essential issues? About 95% of individual genetically determined potential. Yeah, more or less the same thing. Overseas training exposure with lot of sparring and competition. So the overseas thing comes into picture. So we keep pushing the authorities, and in some sports we're kind of advancing with the help of SAG, with the help of ELMS, with the help of other partners to actually get the athletes into overseas exposure so that they can see what's happening outside the country. Remember, like a few minutes ago, I was explaining the logic of like national norms or national standards and then international. So at some point, you start sharing practice with overseas partners. So about potential, 95%. Adaptation reserves an injury-free increase in the intensity of the training loads. All right? So this is the time when training loads are at the highest. And we were talking 500 hours, 700 hours, 900 hours. This is when it reaches 1,000 plus. You kind of push it as hard as you can so that the genetical potential is achieved. Volumes are high anyway, so achieving the genetically determined ceiling isn't always a safe journey. This is where sports medicines come into picture, that's where physiotherapists come into picture, that's where you have to be very careful on, expanding or increasing the intensities of the load and so on and so forth. Because you are pushing at a sort of, not to say unsafe grounds, but on the grounds where mistakes are very costly. And to be even able to push that high, I'm bringing you back to the previous phases of long-term development. You had before some issues and some objectives to be done before you can even think about that. If you missed something back then, the story is that you may not have some time and opportunity to recover it. You may get stuck at some point because you didn't do something before. So make sure that you actually have those whole variety of objectives with you and try kind of do it sequentially. Particularly for the ones who are returning to training after either injury or any other reason, lengthy breaks. So if we are talking about kind of under 21 athletes, yeah, they fight in the tournaments, they do certain things, they don't do certain things, and then they get injured. Sometimes you refer them to specialists, to so on and so forth. When our physiotherapists cannot tackle the problem, they refer to outside organizations or hospitals. Yeah, someone getting through the injury, someone getting through the surgery, getting back is realistically a very serious issue. And particularly, again, this is an issue that returning after lengthy break, particularly related to injuries, it also carries a very strong psychological background. And it started being quite a popular topic in psychological research and practice, psychology of injury and psychology of the fear of being re-injured. So see, when athletes are kind of going through the career without injuries, they don't even think about it. However, when they start getting injured, recovered, injured sometimes again and again recovered, then the fear of getting re-injured comes into picture. And they are holding themselves back. For instance, you suggest that, okay, you take the higher loads or higher intensities or something like that. And they will say, yes, sure, I am trying, but they'll hold back somehow because they are a bit kind of scared of being again injured and again being out of the training, out of the practice, and maybe even out of the, of competing and out of the career. That is a very serious concern. And then there's also a serious concern of, doctor and athlete confidentiality and so on and so forth. Because there is supposed to be a confidentiality. But if I'm a coach, I should also be somehow aware. And if doctor knows something about athlete's injury, which I don't, of course I have to know about it. I need to kind of adjust my training programs accordingly, and that's supposed to be known to strength and conditioning, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to selection, particularly in games like football, hockey, volleyball, basketball, athletes quite often tend to actually not disclose the injury issues, because then they may be out of team. They may not be selected for the squad. So there becomes an issue. Okay. Shall doctor then inform the coach that that person is not stable, and including someone into the team may well result in the collapse of the whole performance of the team? What do you do then? It's also kind of an issue. So, paradox, talented versus hardworking. Okay, let's have some fun about it. That's what I keep typically saying, that, and actually it is Indian observation, it's not any other country. I do remember years ago when I was with Sport Authority of India, I think it started back years ago in Bangalore, Center of Excellence. Back then I noticed one thing, when you have the coaches' reports at the end of the year or at the end of the whatever 6 monthly, the coaches typically will write few words as an, kind of conclusion. Okay, the athlete is has to be retained or has to be so. And there'll be typically two types of characteristics: a very talented athlete, and the other one will typically be a very hard-working athlete. So then, I was not paying attention to that originally. Like, right? You agree? That's your remarks. Very talented and then very hard-working. So you may not be even thinking about it. You may do it like automatically. But to me, after a while, when I was kind of facing that same thing again and again, time and again, I said, aha, now I understand, I think. When you write a hard-working athlete, it means there is no talent. So, talented and hard-working. So, and then again, the same thing comes into picture, like nature or nurture, right? When we talk about talent identification. Is it a kind of God-given ability or genetically determined, which some kid has, but the other kid does not? So that kid still is a hard worker, and the talented kid is quite often what? Lazy. It's a paradox. Talented athletes are quite often lazy. Why? Because everything comes easy with them. They're kind of mastering things without an effort, effortless. They kind of do stuff, they don't think about it. They are gifted, like, at skills, they are gifted physically and so on and so forth. It goes like fun. And they improve, they improve, they improve. They do it like out of nowhere. Easy go. Whereas the other ones, which may not be talented that much, they have to struggle to achieve the same thing, which to other people is kind of coming easy way. And that becomes a big problem. So that these talented kids and already kind of adolescents, they, when it comes to the point when they have to start struggling, it comes to that point sooner or later. It's not always kind of easy, it's not always free ride. Sometimes they bump into something and say, okay, now I have to struggle and I have to apply some efforts, and so they're not used to it. And then at this point in time I say, okay, perhaps that's it. Okay, I've done what I've could. Whereas the other ones who are still with you, I'm not saying they are not talented, but their potential is lower, less than of the others. There's where the point comes that these might well be easy quitters. These will just, stuck to the program, they will continue until they kind of die. And this is where talented are quitting, not that talented are still there and winning. So it's a kind of a bit of a gamble. I'm not saying it's 100% that way, but to great extent it is. And then when it only comes that a talented one becomes a hard worker, then you got a diamond which starts shining. So not just talent, not just potential, but also an effort and so on and so forth and so go on. So that is how, when they reach that particular age under 19, when they start kind of pushing over 90% of individual potential, then everyone, talented or not very talented, potential or not very potential, have to actually work really hard, right? So that is like about this one. Under 21, all right? Overseas training, another issue, all right? And what do we have here? Very limited practice of overseas exposure. There is quite often no concept available. Why do you need foreign exposure? Some people say, okay, why is it? Okay, you can go elsewhere, fine. But there are still places which you might well think of visiting for various reasons. A system, loads, coaching, different this stuff, different that stuff. So it has to be, and of course, again, it's not that simple to explain sometimes, but we will again try our level best. Another thing, I'm giving quite often an example, but that example only works for combat. Again, like boxing, particularly taekwondo, even, I mean, boxing is the best example. That for years together, if you kind of get into training with the same partners, with same boxers or something like that, who are typically the friends of yours. Now ask yourself a simple question. Will you kind of punch your friend or your partner in such a bad manner to send him in a knockout? No. You're friends. You're not punching, you're not beating your friends unconscious. It's sitting there in the head. So you have to go out somewhere, out of the state, out of the country, to realistically meet someone who you can punch in the maximum possible way. Of course you can, you know, that fellow will punch you too in the full-fledged. That's why their position is something important. Don't pick the stronger position straight away, you may regret it. So that's one of the points. Choices to be picked depending on the training objectives. Solution, concept to be developed and finances arranged. All right, conflicts, concept and necessity of financing. That, of course, it is an expensive thing. It requires a lot. But again, see, it appears typically somewhere when you realistically hit international levels for more or less wide level and range of athletes. Of course, you can still go overseas under 14 and under 17 if you have a talent, an individual who is already international that way, all right? But most of them will require that kind of later. And in those training exposures, again, I'm bringing you back to those options, all right? Weaker opposition, stronger opposition, warm-up competition exposure, model competition exposure, overseas exposure. So the last one gets more importance when you get into that under 21 or under 23 age group. Operational issues, still a lot more specific conditioning is required. Still we are back into full nutritional and supplementation things. And one thing which we were not talking about before, but which is sort of appearing at various age categories is coaches. You guys need to become more IT literate and IT kind of savvy. There are a lot of programs, a lot of software. Recently even I was caught off guard, I have to admit that. I was going through one interview back there in Malaysia and I was asked, okay, you are teaching coaching science and performance analysis in the undergraduate level in the university. What software are you using? And I was like, okay. And of course I remember some of the softwares which are typically used for performance analysis, but then I was kind of caught off guard a bit, so I had to say, I said, look guys, okay, we are using Focus 2 Pro, we are using Silicon Coach and something else, but practically speaking, I have to admit that I'm a little bit sitting in an old school boat and teaching students how to actually analyze the performance, which they do themselves like in a more or less non-automated manner. So we talk about tennis or table tennis or badminton, and then we set the software in such a manner that you measure the rally time, okay, the ball and play time, the number of shots, the types of shots, and then number of rallies per game, and so on. And then of course you get the massive numbers of things, and then typically I teach them how to analyze the patterns. But then I understood pretty clearly that it becomes more and more automated. And I had to admit that in my old school understanding of performance analysis, I got a little bit aback as compared with others who are using now, even artificial intelligence is now used for performance analysis. There are kind of cloud-based libraries, and you can sign an agreement with some IT company which will be actually installing whatever camera, and that will analyze automatically, keep it on the cloud. You just go there and get the printout or performance analysis done, but you have to pay for it. So I instead kept kind of explaining how to analyze, how to look into this, how to generate the report. So now people are offering that readily available, ready-made. I still think that performance analysis should be done in such a way that you understand what you are doing, not just clicking a button, receiving the report and following. But we need to, and you have to get into all those software somehow. We will also be trying to keep ourselves updated, and you as well. All right, so a lot more specific conditioning, again revisiting the same thing. One of the reasons why you need to go into more specific conditioning at this age is that typically you may start having more important competitions to peak for. And then what happens if the main competitions and selection competitions are getting into picture? Then you have to qualify somehow into main tournament. Then the other options coming into play, like more frequent picking. If you need to pick more frequently, like 3 times a year or maybe even 4 times a year, you will typically not have enough time and options for overall conditioning or general conditioning, so you will have to replace that with a specific one. So that will either help you re-picking more often or will assist you to actually keep yourself or your athletes in a peak kind of condition for longer periods of time, so that you can perform in many competitions without kind of picking in, picking out, and so on and so forth. So that is actually becoming an issue. All right, coming to the end of this particular age group, training becomes more technical, all right? Injury prevention is supposed to be there, all right? And we have to, of course, take care of your professional development as coaches. That is what we are kind of typically trying, that to convince higher authorities that you should be kind of sent to the seminars, to the conferences, to refresher courses, to certificate courses, so that you actually refresh your knowledge and get yourself into more kind of educational lines and get yourself in so-called lifelong learning, all right? So choices, old school versus like, high tech, that is no way we cannot avoid it or escape it, right? So that's why we will be trying again to keep coaches, scientists, managers in the structured professional development programs. If administration actually agrees, allows, and supports that, you have to, all right? Because otherwise you'll get stuck in certain knowledge which may not be updated on time. Right, one is over. So this is under 19. Now that's what I'm saying, I'm one full session behind. So let me reload. We still